Gilbert O'Sullivan, it's great to see that we're going to have you back in Australia in impending weeks. 2018 was the last time you were here, and good to have you back again.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Paul. It's 5 years. But the good thing is that the last time was the band, the full band. This time it's just myself and Bill Shanley on guitar. The two of us have worked really well together for the last couple of years now. And so we're continuing that. And this will be the first time Australia will see us in that way. So I think it's going to be really nice.
And the first time we'll hear songs from Driven live. That was the album we talked about a couple of years ago, which I was impressed by the fact that you have maintained a formula, a sound that has carried through for half a century. It's incredible, what goes into the craft of creating a Gilbert O'Sullivan song.
I don't analyze what I do, Paul. I just do it. I think it's a danger if you kind of get into. It's a bit like I hear people who write a song they know is going to be a hit. Oh, really? Please tell me. How do you do that? And if you did, every other bloody song you write after that would have to have the same effect. So the great thing is that don't think too much. Concentrate on what you're good at. What I think I'm good at is coming up with a melody, sitting down with a notebook, coming up with a lyric, making a record, having a good record company behind me to get it released, and having people who are prepared to see us live, coming to see us and stuff. So that's pretty much how I kind of put it together.
But having said that, I mean, do you look at songwriters that you admire and then try and dissect what they've done to work out how they've put their formula together?
No, I listen to be influenced. I buy everything. I probably told you that when the last time we spoke, because you have to like what's going on around you. I mean, it's the Taylor Swift, the Chaperone, I like 1975 or a band I really like. So I enjoy. I get something out of it. I mean, I'm hoping to hear good songs. That's the key factor. But if I don't hear good songs, maybe the sounds of the album, the production values, what they put into it will have an effect, an influence for me and stuff. So there's a lot, but it's so important to buy everything and you must like what's going on. Remember George Harrison many years ago when he did an interview, he said how much he hated what he was hearing on the radio. And I'm thinking about a young George Harrison when he was in his when he was early 20s or when he was a teenager, would have loved what he heard on the radio and stuff. So I think there is a danger today if people like myself at our age don't like an element of what's going on, they could be in danger of not being able to come up with the goods themselves.
What about, you mentioned Taylor Swift there, the structure of a Taylor Swift song, and I saw it explained that, from our generation, we always had that instrumental break in the song. With Taylor's songs, there's no instrumental break. It's just all vocal from beginning to end and doesn't give the audience that moment where they put themselves in the position of the songwriter. And, that was explained that attention span is a lot less these days, which is why the songwriters of today have that missing piece of not having the instrumental break. I mean, do you look at songs, am I analysing way too much, or, is that something you've noticed?
No, I think you're right, because they would argue that the days of the M8s, having the middle eight, going in a 3-verse song, to a lot of songwriters say that's gone. What's interesting is that the lyrically minded tracks you hear by the Taylor Swifts, by Lady Gaga and stuff, are all vocally powerful, and there isn't that much break musically in the middle of them. That's down to because the majority of the Taylor Swift records, she doesn't write the music; she writes the words and words, and what she comes up with. So she fills the track with her words. You look at the Lady Gaga, the amount of people involved in the writing isn't just her. I think if it was just Taylor writing a song, arguably there could be a break in the middle and stuff. But I come from that school. It's that Bacharach and David and Lennon McCartney school of writing a song that has 3 verses, 4 verses, and has a middle section. What I love about middle sections is that it can take you off on a tangent out of what the verses are talking about, gives you a breather from that, and then you can bring it back in. I just find that fascinating and stuff. But I do think a lot of writers today, it's just all vocal.
And your songs, a lot of the big hits were around more than 50 years ago now. You've revisited that with the Songbook album. So what was the reasoning to go back and sort of do a Gilbert O'Sullivan bookend? Here's Gilbert in his mid-20s, here's Gilbert in his mid-70s, but the songs are the same.
I'm not a great fan of live albums, Paul. We've recorded Dublin concert, we fully recorded. I've recorded quite a few concerts and stuff. They're on the shelf. So I'm not a great fan of it. But the interesting thing on this with Songbook was that the record company head of BMG came to we did the show at the Barbican in London last year. And he came, and when he was leaving the show, he loved the show. And when he came out, he was talking about how nice it would be to replicate that on record and stuff. It was just Bill and myself. The rapport we have between is the way it works so well. So that led to us going into a studio in London, just the two of us, and reproducing what we do on stage. No audience. We just got a small theatre. And between the two of us, over 2 days, we just performed as we do live the songs that eventually ended up on Songbook and stuff. So I think that, and it worked. I mean, then we added one new song, which I thought was a nice thing. So it's there. It's the bare essentials of certain tracks. There's no get down on it. So it's mostly mid-tempo, kind of the ballad area. I think it worked. So I wasn't unhappy with it when it was finally released and stuff. I think it worked well.
It's good to see you outperforming live again. There was a time where there was basically no concerts, I think from about 1978 to 1991. If you performed at all in that time, it is not documented. Did you actually take more than a decade off touring?
I didn't want to. The problem with the late 70s, I mean, interesting thing for O'Sullivan is that most artists, they before they're successful, have that period where they're either learning it in clubs, they're playing in clubs as a piano player or a guitarist, learning their craft, playing to small crowds, then supporting a major act. That's how it happens. The U2s of this world supported a bigger act before them, and then they become the big act, and you get people supporting Taylor Swift have gone on to have great success. So I didn't come from that school. I came from the school of songwriting. So and growing up in my teenage years, 18, 19, 20 years of age, I was writing songs at home on the piano. That was my learning process. And the interesting thing was when Nothing Rhyme took off, big hit for you in Australia, what would normally happen is that you would go there on the back of that success. I'd be over with you, I'd be doing TV and radio and possibly performing live if I was in that situation. So I didn't actually do a concert until 1970. My first concert was 1972. So I don't come from that background. So that was 2 years of success, and suddenly I do my first concert. So I wasn't a great concert artist and stuff because of not having that background. So it took me a while to really get it together. Now, late 78, 79, broke up with my manager, Gordon Mills. Really not a happy situation. It was over a small issue, which I wanted resolved, and he didn't resolve it for me. It wasn't about money. It was, anyway. And as a result of that, and I thought it might be resolved within a few months, but it actually took 2 years to resolve, backwards and forwards. The cost of all that meant that we moved to Ireland for a few years, where writers are exempt from tax. So it meant that had I lost the court case, I could have then been able to pay for it. And so that took up most of the 80s, most of the 70s, and into the early 80s and stuff. And it was about after we came back from Ireland in 1984, not having toured since that 78 period. When we came back to England, then I was able to start working with musicians again, preparing for the first tour. So the first tour we did was in 1980, and the first album that we got released after the decade of the 70s. And so things started to get back into motion, but in a small way, not in a big way. So 80, 81, 82, started the band thing getting better. So by 1990, I was becoming a better singer, a better touring artist and stuff. So that's pretty much what went on during that period.
So all that happened right at that point when you were having that massive hit with What's in a Kiss.
Yeah, What's in a Kiss with CBS, the record company. I was in a good situation with them. And that was the kind of the last success we had. And moving on, because I left CBS, and then as I say, we were in Ireland. Second album I did with CBS was produced by Graham Goulman of 10cc, which was, so I did 2 albums with CBS, and that, he came to Ireland to record with me. As I say, we were in Ireland from 80 to 84 because of the tax thing. And then we came back and moved to Jersey in the Channel Islands with 2 young children. Jersey is a good place to bring up your children. And so that's, and so it's been a great place for me to write. So then we moved on from there, 90s, touring a bit more. I'm not one of those kind of 52 weeks a year artists and stuff. I'll make the album like you heard driven and stuff. Then I'll get on the road to promote it. That's important. It's no good making a record and not getting out there to promote it. So it's important that you do the live work, because that's very special. It's one thing for people to buy your records and to hear yourself on the radio, but it's another thing to be in a theater with a live audience and stuff. Something really special about that. I think live work generally has become much, much bigger than it ever used to be. Why? Because the Springsteens and the of this world don't earn much money on records now, but they certainly earn it live. It's all arenas, it's all concerts in football grounds and stuff. That's how they're generating their income. So live work becomes a big deal. Not for me, but certainly for them.
Well, you're certainly giving the fans value for money. I mean, there's like 30 songs in one of your set lists.
Yeah, it's a 2-hour set, Paul. Has a break in the middle, a 50-minute break, and then we're back out between the tours. But the great thing is with Bill and I, the good thing with my songs are not every song is I love you, baby, and you love me. I think over 2 hours of that would be a bit of a struggle. So I think there are interesting things I'm singing about which connect with an audience, because when I meet them afterwards, people will say, we liked you with the band, but we thought it was a bit loud. We couldn't hear your lyrics properly. The nice thing about what you're doing now is that it's up close, personal, intimate, and we get to hear the words really clearly. So that's paid off in a good way.
And, the intermission's a great idea for someone like me. It used to be about going to the bar. Now it's about having a nana nap and then coming back in.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Like if you're Bruce Springsteen, after 3 hours, he's still out there.
Oh, yeah. 3 hours and 57 minutes and 30 seconds last time I saw him here in Melbourne. So I don't know how he does it at nearly 80.
I'm not sure anybody wants that much, but I mean, I think you could argue that it's not the amount of songs that he's doing, it's the amount of solos that are taking place in between the songs. A lot of solos, a lot of guitar solos going on and stuff, which compensates for the length of time.
Yeah. You mentioned Graham Goldman there as working with you on producing one of the records. That must have been interesting, having a songwriter producing a songwriter.
Well, as I said, it was the second CBS album. The first CBS album had What's in a Kiss on it, produced by Gus Dudgeon, did all the Elton John stuff. That was really interesting and good for me, because that's the first time I'd worked in that kind of scenario with 5-6 musicians. Before that, it was with a 3-hour session, two songs, a 3-hour session, 2 songs, split out that way. So with Graham, it was the second CBS album. The interesting thing was that I had said to CBS that I would like the producer of 10cc, the writer of 10cc, not Graham, but the other writer who did all the vocals. I'm trying to think of his name.
Eric Stewart, Lol Cream.
Yeah, he produced a band called Sat Cafe, really good production and stuff. So I said to the record company, I said, I'd really like Eric. I know he's producing, so see if you can get a hold of him. So he was unavailable. But when I went in a meeting with people, I said, the bad news is that Eric was unavailable. But the good news is that we have the other artist from 10cc, Graham, who's available, and he can produce. So that's how that came about. And Eric came to England came to Ireland for a little of the recording, and the rest was done in England. So I like that. It was a good album, interesting, and we moved on from there to next time, which was in 1980 when I started producing myself.
I'd have to go back and have a look at what Eric was doing around that time, but I have a funny feeling you were gazumped for Paul McCartney.
Yeah, well, he worked with McCartney. They wrote songs together and stuff. That was, I mean, great songwriter, Eric Stewart. I mean, the legacy of the songs, that Things We Do for Love, and they're there. So great, Graham, he bass player, but nice thing is the concert last year, we got Graham to come out and play bass on Nothing Rhymed and stuff, and came on stage to do that boom bass and stuff. So I have a good relationship still with him.
Chris Spedding worked with you at one point too. Some incredible people played with you back then.
Well, I mean, Chris came up when I started producing myself. My first album that I produced, I was in the key of G, I think, and Chris Spedding for me is one of the great guitar players. And when he came to the studio to play on 2 tracks on that album, he brought a small amp with him. I mean, he just goes out in the room, I put the track on, and he just blares away. I don't interfere. His solo work on the album, the tracks he did for me, and the rockier stuff he did. Brilliant guitar player. I mean, working with great musicians is always a key factor when you've written a song, you go in the studio. Interesting thing for me is that I allow the producer to pick, like for Driven, Andy Wright, the producer who produced Simply Red, I allowed Andy to pick the musicians. I could have picked the musicians. In fact, Bill doesn't play on the record. You could argue that, well, if Bill is with you for live, why is he not on the record? I let the producer pick the musicians, 2 guitar players, organist, drummer, bass. And I meet them for the first time in the studio. They sit around the piano. I play the song. They go back to their chairs. We rehearse it a few times, and we take. So it isn't rocket science. It's quite, there's not a lot of overdubbing that goes on and stuff. But yeah, so people like Chris Benning, I have great respect for them as a musician.
Herbie Flowers as well played with you. It must have been around the same time he was working with Lou Reed, doing that magnificent bass bit on Walk on the Wild Side. And he's worked with David Bowie, Elton John, Cat Stevens, and 3 of the 4 Beatles, Paul, George and Ringo.
Yeah, he did the bass part on Nothing Rhyme, the note, boom. That was my first proper record. Prior to that, I'd had stuff released by Major Minor, who I had a song called I Wish I Could Cry about the death of Robert Kennedy, and they ruined that. And the stuff before that with CBS, my first records, I wasn't happy with that. When Gordon Mills took me on, who was a producer as well as a manager, that was my first real recording session. I remember it because when I came out after 3 hours, Herbie was the bass player. We did 2 tracks. That's how we worked in those days. You did 2 tracks, the A side and a B side. And when I came out from that session, live vocal, Nothing Rhymed, which Gordon didn't like. He wanted me to go, he couldn't have that gap between, if you wanted less piano, he couldn't get that. If you got less piano, it was less vocal. So if he wanted more voice, more piano and stuff. But when I came out of that session at home, I was in 7th heaven. I was in paradise. I had no idea if it was the public were going to like it. But for me to have made that record, the guitar player, I always thought it was Led Zeppelin's who was doing session work at
Jimmy
that time.
Page and
Jimmy
John Paul
Page.
Jones were doing a lot of stuff back then.
But John was a bass player, but Jimmy
John
was
Paul Jones, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, but it wasn't Jimmy, but it was somebody like him who was a young guitar player. So, so that was a magic moment for me. And so from then on, working with great musicians was a key factor.
Was Gordon Mills a control freak? Like, he produced those first few records. How different do you think those records would have sounded if you had a Gus Dungeon instead of in 1980 and 1971?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when we broke up in the mid-70s, by 76, things were quietening down. I think we had our last hit was Why Oh Why, or it could have been the Christmas song, I'm not sure, 75. And I said to Gordon, Rod Stewart has produced by this top-line producer, Atlantic Crossing, American producer and stuff. I said, Gordon, you've produced my records up to now. Things are not really happening. I'm out there writing and stuff, but, I want, to get this more continuous success. And I said, why not let me do what Rod Stewart has done, work with an American producer, because you're still my manager, and it would be good for us to do that. And Gordon said, no. He said, look, if I don't produce the records, that's it. Nobody does it and stuff. And so that's the dilemma I had at that time, to decide what I do. And Gordon would say things like, you're rich, you're wealthy, you got nothing to worry about. Don't worry about this, the non-success you're having at the moment. And I wasn't happy. I was frustrated. I was determined. I wanted continued success. And so that led to the breakup. Because he wouldn't agree to it. And then I spent a weekend just, wondering how I was going to break the news to him and stuff. And when I broke the news to him that I was going to leave, he had promised me, since when he first managed me in 1970, when he took over my publishing, that writers were being given their own little contracts, own little agreements, contract within a major publishing company. It was a new thing. So you'd have Gilbert O'Sullivan music in MAM music and stuff. It was a new thing. So Gordon, and it was offered to me by my publisher before Gordon. But then Gordon comes along and says, look, if you have success, I'll give you that little company thing. So 73, 74, I used to say to him, and occasionally say, any news on that little company you're going to give me? And he said, don't worry, you're going to get it. So 75, I would say to her that, any news, Gordon, on that little company you get? No, don't worry, you're going to be getting it. So when we broke up, at the breakup meeting, and when we shook hands, and I left, and I said to him, as I left him at the door, I said, will I still get that little publishing you promised me? He said, yeah, go into the office on Monday, this is the weekend, go into the office on Monday, and Bill Smith, his right-hand man, will sort it out for you. So the weekend, I go into the office of MEM on Monday, And I go into Bill Smith's office, and he just told me to F off. And that's what led to the court case. So it was nothing to do with reams of money. It was all to do with this small little issue that had been promised to me. And it was horrendous what happened after that. But luckily for me, it didn't work out badly.
Do you have any piano heroes?
Well, yeah, Fats Domino. I mean, I'm not an Errol Gardner. I mean, jazz never really got to me and stuff. But Fats. We do a Fats Domino. I have written a couple of songs in that classic Fats Domino tempo. We do it on stage. I might even do it when we're in Australia because we've kind of played around with it a bit. Elton's a good piano player. Billy Joel's a good piano player. I don't really listen to them for their piano playing. I listen to them for the songs they're writing and stuff. And but other piano players, I'm not sure. Yeah, probably Fats would be the unknown. Yeah, what's his name? Little Richard. No, I didn't get much out. No, I think Fats was the one that had an influence on me.
Well, we look forward to seeing you down in Australia again. We won't be disappointed because I can guarantee, having seen recent set lists, there's a lot of music in there. It's almost like two shows, isn't it? When you do part one and part two, it's like you're your own support act.
That's a good way. That's a good way of looking at it, Paul. Right. So we look forward to meeting you, Paul. Brilliant.
You too.
Good to see you.
Great to see you.